Ken, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you?
Good, man.
Wonderful to get you on the podcast. And as someone who saw the Celibate Rifles a lot back in the day, along with buying quite a few records as well, I do hope to dig into some of your musical journey as well. But firstly, and this is indeed the catalyst for our conversation this evening, are three fairly recent releases, Chasing Chocomel, Damo the Musical, which both saw the light of day back in December and January, I believe. And you also have a wonderful solo album just out called Set Yourself Easy. Mate, let's start with Damo the Musical, if I may. And I guess as some folks who may not be aware, Damo the Musical was a tribute to frontman and voice of the Celibate Rifles, Damien Lovelock, who passed away in August of 2019, and this show was recorded live at the Enmore Theatre in Sydney the month after Damo's passing. Obviously, as a long-time friend and bandmate, I cannot imagine how emotional that would have been to perform that evening, but I guess as time moves forward, the album will serve as an everlasting reminder of Damo, which is a special and positive way to honour his memory, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. As I state, we just wanted to play the gig and be done with it. But there was, out of respect, I guess, people offered to film it, record it, offer their time for stage and services. So we just all went, yeah, okay. I knew that a lot of the work had ended up falling on my shoulders to finish it, but it's what happened. It's the nature of things. So yeah, we did the gig, we did our bit, but now it's the LP's out, the video of we just finished pretty much the last edit of it.
Okay.
So sometime in the next few months there'll be a version of the film. We didn't do the whole concert because, out of respect to the people who were singing, if we didn't nail it or they didn't nail it, we didn't use the version. So, a couple of the Rifles favourites that may have normally got a Guernsey didn't for that reason.
From memory, the show for Damo was originally booked at the Factory Theatre, but demand was so strong that it moved to the Enmore. How did guests like Jello Biafra and Jeff Duff become involved?
Oh, we just asked everyone.
Okay.
It was, people we knew when we decided to do the gig, because there's no disrespect intended to anyone, but when Damo passed, there was people saying, oh, let's do this tribute, let's do this, oh, we'll do this, we'll do a gig here, we'll do this, that. And I was hearing all this stuff, and I thought, nah, fuck it. I thought, look, whatever people want to do for surfing, sport, whatever it is, absolutely. But if someone's going to do music, we better. And we better organise it so it isn't a cock-up, it isn't half-assed, and all that kind of stuff, because, that's the nature of things when people who are out of the goodness of their heart organising something who aren't organisers, it doesn't always work out as they might have wanted, even though the intent is good. And then Tim from Field put his hand up when I sort of said, hey, I rang him off the cuff and just said, look, we should do a show for Damo. Can you, because in many years ago, Tim booked us for a while. So he kindly agreed to help. And then it went from there. We thought, oh, where can we do it? The Factory was one of the starting places. It was available, so we went from there, and then from that it expanded.
Okay, and 12 tracks made the final cut on the album. It is a great mix of Rifle songs across different albums. Also, Sweet Jane and Dirty Deeds on there too. With such a large back catalogue, was deciding on a set list for, a special gig like that difficult?
Yeah, of course it was. It was the ones we would have liked to have done. A lot of it we left up to the singers. There was a couple we'd put forward, but, when there was sadly one old friend who missed out on a Guernsey because I thought, he'd be great to do it. A couple of songs off the EP. But, when Jello agreed to do it, he fired the songs he wanted to do. I went, okay. And so that's what I suggested Shoulda, but he suggested all the other ones. And I think most of the rest of it, whoever could come, whoever could make it or whoever wanted to, we just, within our ability and their ability, they suggested the songs they thought they'd like to sing. So we just went, okay.
Gotcha. What about the, can I ask, where did the friendship with Jello Biafra begin? Can I assume a connection was struck on the Dead Kennedys 83 Australian tour?
Yeah. Well, we'd never met him before that. And, it just went from there. He's like, none of us are bestest buddies, but I liked the Kennedys. I liked what they stood for. I wasn't necessarily a huge hardcore fan, but I liked it. But, they were good blokes and they stood their ground and uncompromising, and I always liked that. And just, and travelling around. When we went to America a couple of times, we'd bump into them in San Francisco. Him or some of them had come to the show. You got to know them. And just other touring over the years, bumping into them here and there. And when Jello came out, he did the spoken word, and him and Damien reacquainted. And
okay. I really like the version of The Saints I'm Stranded, by the way, with Jello on vocals. Was that one close to making the final cut?
Yeah. No, it normally would have, but the Kingdom of the Fool, the song that has just come out, I thought we sort of discussed it and thought that Stranded, and we had to put something on the B-side because it was a bit hard to get Jello to do two songs, and that was the last set of lyrics that Damien wrote.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the story behind it if you want.
Please do.
It's pretty esoteric, so anyone who's not interested in mysticism or is a complete and utter atheist, which I grew up as, but am not now, don't listen for 5 minutes. But it is pretty wacky, which is why I think this has all come about. For quite a while, I'd been trying to get Damien down the studio to finish. We had 5 songs ready. We managed to get, 6 actually. The You're Gonna Try came out. That was a very rough guide vocal he did, but we managed to salvage it with Jim Magini's help. And so I knew this set of lyrics was around because I'd seen it, because, I used to sit with Damien towards the end there and talk about stuff and, told up and coming to have a sing, all that kind of malarkey. And I knew they existed. We had the songs. This was very Damien. It's very funny, but anyone who knows Damien has got to know this. I won't reveal names, but a friend went to have a reading. My partner went to have a reading just for sort of fun, which is something she did. So she paid for a reading to go and talk to this person. And during the reading, the reader was saying, there's someone really trying to interrupt here. And then she sort of said, do you know, it came to me because she came in and said, who was David McComb? I said, David McComb, he was a guitarist and singer in the Triffids, not around anymore. And I said, I wasn't a particular fan of the Triffids. They were nice people, but I didn't like their music. And that was at that time. There was other stuff going on, but that was where my head was at. For all you Triffids fans, sorry, but I didn't get it. I can listen back in hindsight and say, yep, they were very good at what they did. I still don't like it. But nice people. And then she sort of said, she was talking about David McComb, and I said, why are you asking me about David McComb? Am I going to have to sit through a whole bunch of Triffid songs because you've suddenly discovered them? Going, oh, no, here we go for a couple of days. She goes, got a message from Damien saying that he's now hanging out with David McComb. And I just laughed and said, now that is ironic.
Wow.
Because, all of that kind of stuff. And then the other message came through, go and look on this pile under this in his house for the lyrics. I went, oh, okay. So I called Damien's ex and said, can you just go and have a look here? Then she goes, yeah, I found them. I went, all right, guess we better continue with this. And I mentioned it to Jello and said, would you mind just singing these words? He went, okay.
Wow, that's very interesting, very interesting.
Well, it's the sort of thing, whatever you want to believe. You can't say no to that kind of stuff. There's too many coincidences. There's too many things that are funny. There's too many if you knew him, Damien things in there that it's like, when he needed something done, he'd interrupt whatever it was to get his viewpoint through.
Mm.
So, all those things figured into this happening, and then Jello did a good version of singing it. Because obviously Damien wanted to finish this song because the lyrics were there and they would have probably just been chucked out otherwise. And that I knew that they existed because I'd seen the set of lyrics.
Okay.
And we really worked on them. Then it was like, all right, let's proceed.
It leads me on to, and I am always interested in the songwriting process, and this could be a tough one, as you and Damo wrote so many great songs together over a long period of time. But is there one or two fond memories you have of Damo where you were maybe composing something together and he just came up with something brilliant which floored you? I don't know, any memories of those songwriting moments come to mind that you can share?
Probably not at the top of my head.
Mm.
You can give me a couple of days on that one, maybe
Sure.
something. I mean, we used to, in the early days, we'd sit together and write. Sometimes I'd start with some words and he'd elaborate, or the other way around. But, I'd have a riff or some stuff, or he did, and we'd just sit around and stuff had come up.
Mm.
It's sort of, the answer is I can't say, not for any reason other than I can't remember, because
that's okay.
That was the process. For the first few albums, that was the process. Then through other circumstances, it evolved into we'd get the music together and then Damien would just write the words in his time as he felt it. Sometimes I did, like later on, occasionally, like I'd sort of say Light of Life, the song on Heaven on a Stick. I said to him, look, have a go at a song that's a little more positive, life-affirming. And he came up with that, which is a great set of lyrics. And, occasionally I'd set him off like that, rather than always being miserable. But, I have some memory of, we had a fair chuckle, don't know if it was just me and him or a few of us would Wake Up, the song on Midstream, because that's a very funny song.
Mm-hmm.
It's very Damo, and, very, still very appropriate, unfortunately. That's the shit about a lot of the Rifles history that still annoys me, is that, in 1964, Ferlinghetti wrote a poem called Salute. We put it in Thank You America in 84 and in Salute on 2004, and it's still relevant.
Mm. Yeah,
that stuff shits.
It's interesting. Before we move on...
It's just not good.
Before we move on, I found an old quote from Damo on the I-94 bar written by Earl O'Neill, which he states something I think was so crucial to the magic of the Celibate Rifles, if I can quote. Damo said, I brought, I think, a different ear. I didn't grow up on the Pistols. I grew up on Joe Stafford, all the jazz singers my mother listened to, 50s rock and roll. Of course, I had an older cousin who was right into it. She was like a big sister. She was an only child. I was an only child. So 4 or 5 years old, I was listening to whatever she was listening to. Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis. Those were her teenage years. Bobby Lee, Bobby Rydell, that stuff. So when I came to the Rifles, my idea of a cover version and theirs were pretty different. Theirs might extend all the way back to 1975, whereas I think the first song I taught them was Runaway, Del Shannon. It was like, are we going to play this? And we played it and everyone liked it. So I think I brought along an attitude, a width to the music that wasn't there. Equally, I learned from them. They had this encyclopedic knowledge of this really narrow band, Detroit sound or whatever people called it back then. And so I learned things off them that I wouldn't have learned, like the MC5. I knew who they were, but I never really listened to them or took them seriously, to tell you the truth. I guess, Kent, that's a wonderful insight there, isn't it, which says so much about where the magic coming from different influences which helped to create the sound which the Rifles created.
Yeah. I mean, it's not entirely true, but it makes a good story.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it is. When he met us, that was a stage of my life and our life where we were focused on a particular narrow genre of music. But, I had sticky fingers and all of that stuff. I knew all that music and liked it. It just wasn't what I was particularly focused on at that time. But it's absolutely true that what Damien brought, I'm grateful for him for, Tony Joe White and that kind of stuff. Those aspects. But, I was already listening to John Lee Hooker and, perhaps Magic Slim and a few other blues guys. I love Lightning Hopkins. My favourite blues guitarist, or of almost any guitarist, is Robert Pete Williams, which I don't know a lot of people heard about, but, he doesn't play 12-bar. He hears the sound of the song on the wind and plays it. And that's what I love. You know, I love sort of improvised music. But the Rifles was the sum of its parts. Damien brought a whole lot to it. We all brought whatever we did, and we learnt and expanded together. And within our limitations, we're open to try anything. And the limitations were placed upon us from outside of the Rifles, not within it. We'd have done anything, but there were times where it was like, no, you shouldn't do that.
Can I ask, in the late 70s, Damo was in a band called Street Noise. I've never been able to find much info on them. Did you know if he demoed any material with them?
I very much doubt it.
Okay.
I don't. There's a box of some old tapes I've probably got lying under the house here. Mm-hmm. I didn't notice anything from that in there. Okay. He never told me they were recorded because I just don't think it was what people did that much back then.
Sure. And
if you had $50, it probably went on something else, not recording.
Yeah. Mate, one of the other recent releases I wish to highlight is Chasing Chocomel.
Yep.
From that, we in fact kicked this show off with Jesus on TV, and I believe the material for this release came from cassette recordings of radio broadcasts being from the Netherlands in the late 80s and another gig at Paddington RSL in 1992, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember the DAT existing, but I don't know where it is.
Okay.
And I remember the quarter-inch tapes of both those Dutch shows we did have once, but I don't know where they are. And somehow a cassette showed up through Stuart, whether it was potentially, I have a hunch, but I don't know, because we shared some tapes. Like those Dutch things would have been people taping it off the radio or the engineers or whatever it is. But travelling around, we had a good nature, shared a few tapes of music we liked, and then, in my Nevetti, I had no idea that people would then sort of bootleg them and share them on and do all that kind of stuff, and, ostensibly don't care. But, no one ever told you about it. Actually, I was sitting in Italy once and talking about stuff with the Italian label I had for Yage, Yage, the Italian band I had for a while. And we were just sort of sitting there and we were talking to the record company guys. I said, look, I don't mind if any, because back there was still records being put out there. I said, I don't mind if anyone bootlegs us or anyone. But my problem is they never bloody give you a copy of it. And then the guys gave us this sheepish look and walked off and came back with 25 copies of a bootleg of the Celibate Rifles and the New Christ.
Nice.
Yeah, it was funny.
I think the fans really appreciate this kind of material being released from the archives, and I know that there was a recording from Byron Bay also issued last year. Yep. Is this a trend which will continue in the future?
Yeah. I mean, it's something. It's me sort of going back to remembering when I was younger, and these tapes exist. Some have showed up. Damien was a bit of a hoarder, so he had a bunch of cassettes and other things as well. But I remember when I was getting into music and as a teenager, it was very, very different then. You'd listen to what you could on the radio, but whatever, any band you liked, you wanted to hear everything about them. And much as I don't particularly want to sit through old Celibate Rifles tapes or listen to the Rifles, I still love the band and what we did.
Mm.
So as a gesture, I'm finding what we can. We've got, soon to be coming is a gig from us in 1982, which when I listened to it, I didn't even remember we wrote some of those songs, so that was pretty funny. So there's probably about another 10 things coming, some outtakes, all that kind of stuff.
Nice. I do have some stuff as well. I got a desk tape from DY, I think 91, Gladesville as well. I'll get them to you. But
I mean, those Gladesville gig, I mean, we always played really well. Was that banjos or something?
Yeah.
That was a great sounding stage, and I remember, it was a Thursday night gig or something, but it was always really good.
Now, another interesting track on this release is an interview with Damo, conducted in Holland in 87, where the interviewer says, "You won't be shot here, I assure you." 50 days later, Damo, yourself and Damo's girlfriend at the time were involved in an armed hold-up at a post office in Amsterdam. Damo was shot in the hand and hospitalised, but went on stage later that night and performed. Pretty incredible story, isn't it? I guess, how close were you to being shot, and how was his hand?
I was the one with the gun at my head.
Wow, that's serious.
it's once again, it goes back to mysticism. Yeah, it's not something you want to have happen. It's a good experience to live through, but, we were just hanging there, and, so I heard this noise, and these blokes ran into the post office with motorbike helmets on. I thought, fuck, these guys are a bit weird. And the next thing you know, they went on. But, I was sitting there. One of them grabbed me, stuck a gun on my head, and I went, okay. And, you look at him and you think, I'm bigger than him. I could probably have a go at this bloke. And then I thought, you know what? He's got the gun. I'm just going to chill. So I did what I wanted to do, which was I just started meditating. So I just went into a type of meditation while he was doing his thing, and I think they let off 6 shots. And then, as you see, bang, gun goes back in my head, bang, gun goes back in my head. So it was an experience to have. And, basically, Damien was just hanging there, and he was like a foot taller than all of them. And he had his hands on the wall like, you'd see in a bank robbery in a movie or something. And they let off a passing shot, which I think in Dutch they said, don't follow us. And it ricocheted off the roof and went through the webbing of his finger. So it was,
I guess stories like that really should be in a book. Can I ask if there's plans underway for a definitive band history to be published in the future?
I don't know. I think Earl O'Neill started one. A couple of people over the years have,
Okay.
People have talked about doing documentaries and all this kind of stuff. We always say, sure, but don't make us do it. And as it turned out, I'm the one who's, in conjunction with Dave, the editor, and Jason, who did the sound, ended up finishing this Enmore documentary. And, a book could happen. If someone wants to do it, they're more than welcome to. I just don't want to. I was there. That's good enough for me.
Sure.
Selfish enough,
And
there's some amazing stories, but
there are.
Damien started a book. I don't know if it's somewhere. It's probably half to 2/3 finished, called Sometimes, that he started writing on pretty much the history of the rifles. It may exist somewhere. And it'd be good, but
so
we all live there. We all know stuff, but if he's not around, he's the best storyteller.
Yeah,
Dave's pretty funny, but I don't necessarily live in the past. If someone asks me, I can be directed back, but I don't. I'm happy it happened.
And for some folks who may not be aware, Chocomel is a Dutch brand of chocolate milk. Before we move on,
yeah, it was. We first time we toured there, we discovered Chocomel, and it was something we enjoyed drinking.
Cool. Now, Kent, I do also wish to mention another important release from the Rifles, which may have been missed by some fans from a couple of years back, called Extract from the Fungus, a collection of songs recorded through the history of the Celibate Rifles, from Honey Farm Studios in Duffy's Forest in '83 to Damien's final recording with the band during 2019. The Donna Summer cover is great, and I really like the take of Thunder's You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory. I was going to mention that before, that, as a fan, what separates, in my opinion, a good band from a great one is to have a singer with a distinct and unique voice. And, whenever you heard that, you knew that's what another thing which separated the Rifles above others.
Oh, absolutely. It was the trials and tribulations of years in a band. Damien was great. I mean, there was times in our career where people said, fucking, you dump that singer, you guys will be millionaires. And fuck off. It's like, we're mates and this is what we do. And, we'd miss a lot of the humour and the wit and the politics if we did that, we were the sum of our parts. But at the same time, there were some songs some of us could hear, you could sing a certain way, and he just couldn't or didn't. You'd say, try this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, no worries, I'll give it a go. And you go out and he just goes, Damo. So, yep, all right, cool. So you just accept that's what it is. But, the thing you realise when you do something like the Enmore show or anything else, anyone else steps up to sing a rifle song, you just go, whoa. Very few people have that power. And,
good point.
And Damo and all those people, there was some great singers got up with us that day who are probably in character, in ability and in skill, much better singers than Damo would ever be. But man, that guy had power in his voice. You always just say it was to cut over mine on Dave's guitar. So he had to learn that skill and narrow the focus. Perhaps we were the reason he didn't have a great range, because there was two frequency points he could penetrate through the guitars on, and he found them, and that's what worked. But yeah, he had an amazingly powerful voice.
Before I move on from that release, there's a cover of a fairly obscure 1966 B-side from the Purple Hearts called "I'm Gonna Try," which significantly was Damo's final recording, was it not?
Yeah, he'd been trying to get us to do that for years.
Really?
And we'd had a couple of cracks at it, and eventually, you know, we got it into the set and said record it, because he said him and Warwick Gilbert from Birdman, Hitman and all that, they were both big fans of that song. I don't know if Warwick ever tried to get Birdman to do it, but yeah, they both thought that was a great song. But Damien was always at it. He reckoned it was a great song and we should record it. And so we did.
It's great.
And that ended up being his last bit.
Mate, if it's okay with you, I am going to drift through the time tunnel somewhat and dig into some band history, if I may. I have tried to arrange these chronologically to make it easier, but now let me start with a quote I found again on the I-94 bar in a great article written by Earl O'Neill, where you said, "My old man brought home a guitar one day. I started playing. I was liking punk music. Not that I was a punk or knew anything about it. I liked the energy of the music, the politics." Was that an acoustic guitar your dad brought home from you? And from there, were you self-taught or did you take lessons?
No, it was an electric.
Okay.
It was an old Sacklin. Yeah, it was a weird thing. It wasn't very good. But no, it was an electric guitar because my brother played bass.
Okay.
And, he was doing some stuff. And at first it was, I think at first I was just jamming with mates. It was, I'd go up and play with some mates, and it was pulling bongs and playing guitar was easier than most other things, and it was better than doing homework. So it was a focus to do some practice. And then when it got to a point where I needed to learn some more, I think I had half a dozen lessons off some fella. And then the rest of it's just you learn as you go. Watching people, being inspired, listening to stuff, finding a new genre of music, and then just watching what people do. And, other people will show you stuff. And then you get sort of locked in your box. And life experiences, as I've unfolded as a human and heard other things and tried other things, other bits come in, and you go, okay, I don't want to play this super fast stuff anymore. What else happened, Because I think I said in this guy called Magic Slim. We had a gig, one of the early times when we were in the States, we were playing around and we got a gig in Chicago supporting the Ramones. So it was like, oh, this is a good night. Rifles played first, played the Ramones, saw the Ramones, said hello, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm in Chicago, I better go and watch some blues. So me and Dave went out. I think we had a couple of friends around or something, and we went out and just watched blues and found this club that we could find, and Magic Slim was playing there. Wow. And this guy, you can sort of see old footage of him. I don't know if he's still around, but he was fairly recently. He's about 6'4", played a Fender Jazzmaster, and I was just watching this music, and I love blues. Since I was a late teenager, I think, you start off on the sort of more Western blues, and when you find the original guys who were doing it, you go, oh, that's a whole other level of stuff there. And but what he was doing with his guitar playing, I just thought the tone and the feel. So what he was doing with one note, I'd been trying to do with 50. So it was like that night was a great lesson in, okay, pare it back and try and do more with less, that kind of stuff. So just things like that as you wander around, and then you meet guitarists and you see other people playing, and, I still get inspired, playing in the Family Dog with Jim Magenie's amazing. That guy's a monster. And, Midnight Oil do their thing, and they're a great historical band for Australia, but Jim doesn't get to let loose much. And, I guess I helped kick him a little bit to inspire him to go, hey, the solos can go a bit longer than 20 seconds. And he lets loose. If anyone's seen some of the Family Dog shows, I'm not shabby on guitar, but when Jim lets go, there's something else going on there. So it's the two of us together can turn into something pretty nice. But it's the same. You just anyone I play with, doesn't have to be that. Some flamenco stuff I've seen in Spain. I love that music and that passion and that power. And then some, traditional music I've seen in France and friends I've hung out with there. You just learn other things. There's other bits of scale. And, even, playing with Dennis Tech, even though he does his thing, he was learning other styles of guitar playing, and, all the bits rub off. of the people you meet and the things you see, and, even just watching some guy anywhere, anyone you play with, you learn something, anyone you watch, if you pay attention. It takes it to a new way of perception as you perceive that about yourself, your own life experiences go in, discovering tea. I'm very deep into tea, and, that kind of, the essence of that changes how you approach sound and music.
If we can drift back a little bit to those early days, were you seeing bands back then around, was it the Northern Beaches you were raised?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wherever I could. My main issue with that was when I was 16 trying to get into gigs, I looked 12.
Right.
So even when they weren't checking ID, it was hard for me to get into gigs. Okay, I did a couple of things with my brother, but, it was also that risk for him that if I went, he wouldn't get in. Or I'd have to sit in the car, which, he probably wouldn't have given a shit about. But it was like, there was some... But, yeah, I can't remember, that 2JJ used to put on concerts. I remember seeing Midnight Oil and Rose Tattoo and a few bands like that at those. I always liked what rocked harder, even though, you were open to whatever. I think there was Richard Clapton and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. I think they had some things once. I remember seeing some Ayers Rock and a whole bunch of other things. You'd go and see whatever you could as a kid.
Yep.
Pub was harder, whatever else was on. I remember, I think I saw My Sex and Flowers, one of the earliest gigs when I was about 15 or 16, and snuck into the Antler at Narrabeen. But there was a period, unfortunately for me, I think I saw the Thought Criminals and some of those kind of bands, but there was a small period of time where I was almost old enough to get in, but not, where looking 13, they were all checking ID. So there was a period where I couldn't see, I sort of couldn't get to the Birdmen and that level of things. I could sort of get in, by the time the Hitmen and the other side showed up, I can get into gigs and some of that kind of stuff. So I didn't get to see Saints or Birdman or any of those things like that, or in that particular time, because I just wasn't feasible.
Sure.
Suburban boy, and just wasn't possible in the world.
Mate, there is a great early photograph of the band playing at Davidson High in Sydney back in '78, supporting Supernaut, back when bands used to play high schools, I might add. Any standout memories from that early gig? Just doing it, Yep.
As I said, you can drag me there, but I'm not always that clear on the past.
Sure.
But yeah, we did our thing. It was good. They were good at what they did, So I remember having a quick conversation with them about it. They were supportive. Seemed to be quite nice fellows. It was just, music was everything. You're at school and you're doing all these things, but there was a point where I just knew I wanted to play music. I knew I was going to have to do other things in the meantime, but so I liked playing. There wasn't much else to do, Smoking dope with me mates and playing guitar was pretty much it, and I had enough brain power to bluff my way through school until the very end. I could bludge through easily until I think the HS, and then you actually had to do some work, so that didn't go real well. But I got into plants and gardening and music, so I just did whatever I could do around being able to play music.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful time period as well. Back when music, everyone was into music, and it's the generation growing up now. We've had the lies and malarkey that they've just placed upon people for 2 years, but aside from that, it's a different world. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I never wanted to be a grumpy old bastard saying, these young bands, I don't know. Some of the music I get, some I don't understand, but it's a totally different way, because in our time, you earned your chops by doing gigs. Sure.
Today, it seems it's the exact opposite. You get your socials right, you rehearse for a year, and then you come out and you do the one gig. And maybe it's a great thing if that's how they feel it, but, it's just, there was the opportunity in Australia, in the 1980s in Sydney. For arts, that's a golden era that will probably never, unfortunately, be repeated. And if you weren't,
no, it won't.
you could never understand it. Sydney especially, Melbourne and other places to a degree, but Sydney was just, you could go out any night of the week, see theatre, art, music, and it was on, and it was until the fucking Olympics and pokies, people thought going out, as we were talking about banjos before, every decent pub had a night for music, or one night was rock, one night was jazz. People saw the arts as a viable thing and as an exceptional, reasonable thing to do with your time and support it. Whereas that sort of changed with the manipulation of society and the way people think into a different politic and a different way of being, where the arts went back to being some piece of shit, and if you weren't, parading yourself or you weren't into sport, that wasn't of any value.
Well, I don't want to get too off track, but I can tell you that, my brother and I, going through the gig guide, it sometimes we'd have to knock back bands. You plan your week ahead, and I think, well, I can't be in 2 or 3 places. If one's over at Bondi and one's at Narrabeen, I'm not going to make it. So,
yeah, exactly. We always had, when we were starting and going out, on the weekends, because I was living with Dave, I think, and a couple other guys, and it's like you got to go out and see a couple of gigs. Which ones can you make? And you'd listen, and it's incredulous to anyone now, but the 2JJ What's On used to go for half an hour.
Sure.
You'd sit there for half an hour, and listening to, okay, which bands, they're on there, that one we can get to, though that one's not near the train line, or, whatever. But yeah, it was great. It was, and you could just go out and take a punt if you didn't hear it. We'll just go to this place and see, if they're not any good, you'd walk up the road and find someone else. Or not any good, not to your taste, you go, okay, let's try this other place.
If I've got my Northern Beaches musical history in order, it was Andrew and John Farris, along with Michael Hutchins from INXS, who attended Davidson High, but Tim, Kirk and Gary went to Forest High. But those guys were, of course, a little older than you guys, and had obviously moved on by the time the Rifles formed, correct?
Yeah, they were in my brother's age group, I think.
Okay.
I remember they played at the school once.
Yep.
It's all that, if it's interesting history, fair enough. It's never concerned me, that stuff. But
sure.
Yeah, it was that thing. Those guys were around.
Okay, and I'm going to test your brain power here. There's another early show I found in an old gig guide, being Saturday, 3rd of May 1980, the Phantom Agents plus Celibate Rifles at North Stain Golf Club. Ring any bells?
Surf Club. It was the Surf Club at North Stain.
The Surf Club, right. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to put those things on ourselves, It was like when you were starting, you try and do something, and I think a couple of our schoolmates were clubbies at that place, so they could get access, and we'd put it on, and I don't know if it was $1 on the door or free entry. It was just an excuse to have a play. So you get a few friends together, and it's an excuse for some 15 and 16-year-old kids to have somewhere that looked reasonable to be taken, and scull your booze and do your stupid kiddie stuff.
Yeah.
While we made a record at them. Probably sounded horrible in there, but it was to play, and it was wonderful.
And I guess, as is well known by most fans of Australian underground music, in 1983 you joined the New Christs for a brief spell. What was the feeling like when you first plugged in with that lineup? And I guess, in terms of production skills, which I will touch on soon, I imagine you were gaining experience from working with guys like Rob Younger. Yeah, absolutely. It was a good thing to do. It was nice to be asked. They were great guys and good players, but that was a great band. It had a lot of power. But yeah, agreed.
I can still say to this day, I can't say from watching it, but I've never played in any band that has the power of the Celibate Rifles. There's an energy in the Rifles. There's something that the Rifles do that no one else has ever. I've played with some pretty good musos, and
sure.
They're great bands, and I really love it. But some bands might be more skilled. We might have done other things. They might have been better than the Rifles, but no one had the power of the Rifles. There's something about the Rifles. When you step in that energy and you step on stage, there's nothing more physically demanding and nothing more powerful that I've ever done. From an insider. Whether that translated off the stage, I don't know. I can't impose that view on anyone. I can just tell you from my own experience of being inside it.
No. I as a punter, I used to sometimes watch the band, and very few bands would actually, build an energy where you'd get thrown back. And some nights, the Rifles definitely had that. Yeah. I'm sure many would agree with me. Rob would, of course, produce 1992's Heaven on a Stick album, and this is a nice segue into the song Grooving in the Land of Love, which I guess is one of the most commercially successful releases for the band. I've always loved the female background vocals on that track, which really gave it so much broad appeal. Whose idea was it to have the female vocals on that one?
It's probably Damo's.
Okay.
I think he knew. That was Lynn, wasn't it? He knew her from somewhere.
Yeah.
And, you try things. We were open to all those kind of things. I have mixed feelings about that record.
Oh, really?
And, Rob, we had those discussions. Yeah, they were good songs, but it was, once again, I'm not trying to be disparaging. It was of the time as its time. There's some great songs and I really liked it. But that particular time, in my view of the world and who we were and where we were going, we needed to make a bit harder, tougher record than Blind Ear. And that's where we would have taken a step. Because I was looking at the rest of the world. But the management and the rest of it were looking at Australia and trying to break us in Australia one extra step. And that's a very clean record where we recorded individually, which is a great way to get certain sounds, and it's a great way, but it didn't feel correct to me. But I went along with it, and, I told Rob this. I'm not telling you anything I haven't spoken to Rob about. He did a great job, and the others were really happy, and nothing affects the friendship. I just thought we should have made a harder-sounding record at that particular time in our career rather than, he was probably under pressure from management, record company, and maybe Damo to try and get us a hit.
Mm.
Whereas I was looking at, you guys probably haven't noticed, but there's a thing called Sub Pop and Soundgarden and Nirvana and all those guys doing that stuff, and I've seen that. And, those guys got some of their sounds from us, so we should be making a better version of what we do, not an Australian top 40 focused sort of thing. But that's just compromises you make in a record. The record before, probably I had too much control, so if someone else wanted to have a go and we've been okay like that, well, someone wants to try something, go for it.
Just going on from that, I was going to ask, was there any pressure with recording Heaven on a Stick? Because, the band had made commercial inroads with Blind Ear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, because I just live my world and we communicate, we do our thing. I don't think anyone ever sat down and said, as a band, we got to make this. But I think there was expectations from outside, and it wasn't my turn to produce a record, so I was happy to stand aside. A couple of the people we might have wanted, we probably couldn't afford, and Rob was great. He was a great choice, and it gave him a chance to show what he could do, and they all did it. And, the record stands its test of time, but I think it was the wrong sounding record to make at that time, was my stated opinion then and still is. I don't bear grudges and I don't hold any problem with it, because it stands on its own as what it is, and there's some really good songs on that record. And, I think had we done it a little harder, we might have done a bit better.
You can't go back though, can you?
No. Well, maybe.
Mate, over the years, yourself and Dave have created some riffs, that have and indeed will stand the test of time. You never seem to have a shortage of new riffs. Can I ask, how is a riff, say, the opening of say, Jesus on TV or Wonderful Life? Do you know how those were born? Can you recall?
Not exactly. Wonderful Life, I think, was me and Damo sitting around. He might have had a couple of chords. They were very, very much his style of music, the chorus of Wonderful Life. And then, so I go, okay, if you're going to make us do that, I got to fuck it up a bit. And so that riff came from somewhere. Jesus on T, some songs come at sound check, sometimes jamming. I've found in my writing history, sometimes the first thing I play when I pick up a guitar turns into a song. Johnny was that, and a few. It's like I had a very, very narrow-minded viewpoint. Was if I picked up guitar and played it for a while, if I remembered the riff an hour later, then it was worth remembering. But that came and bit me a number of times because, as things change, you don't necessarily hold that energy. So I try and record things now. But a lot of it's jamming.
Okay.
I prefer standing in a room jamming. I liked getting together with the guys because it's the sum of its parts. The energy comes up. You might have a riff, and so everyone's different. I think Mikey used to bring completed songs in his head, and then he'd bring them in. And even in the early days with James Darrick, these guys would come in with songs, and then it's like, hey, it's me and Dave playing these. It's not the Dictators guy. It's not this guy. It's not all these other guitarists you're hearing on a record. It's me and Dave. We do what we do. So if you want it to sound like that, record it yourself or let us do our thing. And that's how that turned out in a lot of senses. And but to answer your question, most of the songs I like when we just hang around jamming, because I love jamming. So, there'll be a beat, there'll be a riff, you play that, we'll play it for a while. As everyone kicks into it, you go, it should go this way, it could go this way, and then, take it from there.
Love it. Now, I hope I've got my dates correct here, but July the 12th, 1986, a gig at CBGB's, which was released as the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang album later in the year, was not in fact the Rifles' first show at CB's, was it? That, in fact, took place a couple of months prior on 24th of April 86, opening up for Cherry Bombs, which had a couple of former members of Hanoi Rocks in their lineup. On paper, a bit of a mismatch, I guess. What are your recollections of that first gig at CBGB's opening up for the Cherry Bombs?
Oh, it was a hoot, It was just fun to be there, when we started playing music, I'd have liked to have made a record. You just start playing music. You never expected we were going to make a record in those days, and then we eventually made one and that. And then, through a mate of my brother's, I made a couple of phone calls and we thought, let's go somewhere. And Damien knew about CBGB's. We'd all heard of it. So, this guy booked us 3 gigs, Boston, CBGB's, and I think it was Maxwell's in Hoboken. They were great. It was great to be there. The sound on stage at CB's is tremendous. It's a really good sounding room. We obviously cobbled together whatever amps we could. We must have rented them or got them somewhere. And it was fun, there must have been some kind of buzz because, a lot of the New York Illuminati were there on that first gig. I mean, Joey Ramone, I think there's quite a few of those folks around sort of watching, so someone knew we were there.
Okay.
Because, it was I tell you the weirdest thing about that gig and those first 3 gigs in America was there was these dudes who became fans, because I'd never come across this, because maybe people did in Australia, but I'd never seen it. But you play a gig and all these guys have got records at the gig. And I go, hey, can you sign my record, man? I said, what for? I'm just going to fuck it up with my name on it. I had no concept and wasn't interested. But, these guys would carry records to gigs, and it's like, mate, you're obviously not drinking. You'd smash them and lose them, or you haven't been to one of our gigs somewhere else. But that's what I found. It's the idiosyncrasies that like that I found really weird.
Yeah.
To most music fans, I'm probably the weird one because I would never think to do such a thing. But that took a bit of getting used to for me.
Yeah.
What you got to do a record at a gig for? Nowadays, everyone's buying merch and that kind of stuff. But nowadays, back then it was rare. These guys carried their collections in.
Interesting. And I didn't get there till the early 90s, and I just remember the toilet in CBGB's was absolutely horrific, and I'd seen a few.
Oh, yeah. Had the dressing room toilet. Everyone was almost never cleaned, probably.
Yeah.
But, it's part of it.
Yeah. Mate, David Frick from Melody Maker wrote a glowing live review from that gig dated May 10th, 86, and I quote, "These surf hoodlums from the northern beaches of Sydney come on with attitudes to spare. Steedman punches over his guitar in a Superman t-shirt with ferocious concentration, glaring at his wah-wah pedal as if it had just insulted his mother." Just love that, and I think he really nailed it there.
it's probably true there's an intensity, but I'm also not usually very serious. My aim is to enjoy myself, but play as well as possible.
We just touched on Blind Ear. In some ways, I guess it was as close to commercial success that the band enjoyed. Songs such as Johnny, Oh Salvation and Electrovision Mantra on there. How do you look back on that Blind Ear and that magical time period?
It was the sum of its parts, as we were talking before.
Yeah.
The nature of it. It was sort of handy that, you know, there was someone who sort of was prepared to put a little bit of their money where their mouth was and support the Rifles and have a go at it. Because, you know, we're a band that could have done a lot more successfully had certain things happened. But we're our own, well, I'll speak for me, I was probably our own worst enemy at times. But it was a great time because we started off, you know, we'd played America, we'd done all that, we'd done Roman Beach Party, we did 8 months on the road around Europe and America and stuff, and it was a hoot. We came back to Australia and then somehow the True Tone chucked a deal at us, so it's like, okay, we're not going to be going back to Europe, which, you know, I was probably much more interested in doing than schlepping around Australia. So we made this record and we went out for a 5-week tour that went for 5 months.
Yeah.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was how much you could play in the 80s in Australia. It was 88 or 89 or whatever it was. I don't know dates. Don't remember things. But that tour was fantastic because, you know, the most we ever played any venue in 5 months was 4 times. So that shows you the breadth of venues and possibilities and that could happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was potential to take a next step, but, you know, there was, unfortunately, that record, I think if you wanted to analyse it, the Rifles were either ahead of the game or behind the game for most of our career. And when the guy tried to take Blind Ear to America and England, he was just basically told, what's this bloody shit? It's garbage. It'll never catch on. Whereas, you know, 18 months later, the band was number fucking 1.
No, I'd say just ahead of the game.
Yeah, but that was the nature of things. And, you know, so nothing came of that in that respect. But it was a great time. We got some respect and regard within our own country. We played tours, you know, and as a muso, it was great. You know, for 2 years, we actually got paid for it.
Yeah.
And you turn into a good band. We turned into a very good band, touring in Europe and the States, playing a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I think I watched when all that stuff happened with Damien, a video showed up of a gig from San Diego in 1987. That was the last gig of a 8-month tour. And I just look at it and we were so fast and so tight. Like, whoa, wow.
Yeah.
And the same, you know, the Blind Ear tour, we really, the beauty of it, aside from, you know, not having to worry about money or things like that for a couple of years until it all ran out again, was that you could focus on being a band. You could actually play and, you know, hone your craft, hone your skill.
Yeah.
That's the blessing of being able to do that and having that even only for a couple of years experience in my life. Some other people have done it for a career, but there's compromises you make to be able to pull that off. But it's great. That was the beauty of that time. We played a lot. We got very good at it. We got to explore ourselves and, you know, learn shit, meet people, have laughs.
Yeah. And so many of us have many fond memories of different gigs, but those gigs in particular for that album, I think, are some of my most special. And I only just recently learnt that it was, in fact, Damo's cheap camera purchased from a duty-free store in Sydney before the first American tour that would produce the covers for both the band's biggest-selling albums, Roman Beach Party and the just mentioned Blind Ear, both shots taken by him on that camera, which is a pretty cool story. And the forest, which is displayed on the cover of Blind Ear, I believe was located on the west coast of Ireland. So there you go.
Yeah, that sounds correct. Yeah, I remember the camera. Yep. The Beach Party gig was a hoot. Actually, for those who are interested, I found it. Thumbing through stuff, I found a cassette tape of that gig. So I'll master it up and stick it up on the digital stuff.
Great.
One of these days.
Okay, well, I mentioned the CBGB's gig from 86 earlier, but if I can, let me hit you with a couple of other memorable gigs from the past which I've selected, which I'd possibly like your thoughts on. I guess, what about supporting a reunited Birdman at the Metro in '96? I imagine that's one which you think back very fondly of. That was a powerful night of music.
Yeah, probably. It's I can't really know. We played well. They played well.
Yeah.
It was that kind of stuff. Some of the stuff. I probably remember some other things. Otherwise, Max's in Petersham was a great room.
Yeah.
The Birdman gig was good. It was good to do it. It was good to make them pull their socks up. If you play after the Rifles, you got to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Dennis Tech before. We interviewed Dennis about 4 years ago, and I made mention of just how much firepower was in that lineup. When you were in the lineup, he agreed and commented that it was a great lineup. Can I ask if there's a chance of you and Dennis writing and recording more material in the future?
I think there's always a chance. It's just, the challenges of the tyrannies of distance and life and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I don't know. I got a message from him a while ago that maybe someone in Italy's putting that Outside record out again.
Okay.
Maybe that will inspire him. I'd play with Dennis anytime. That was a great band. It was a hoot.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Great moments.
There was the Big Day Out show from '92, which comes to mind as a memorable gig. But what about this one? 29th December '84, Heathcote Oval, INXS, Models, Hoodoo Gurus, Dynamic, Hypnotics, Cockroaches, Celibate Rifles, and I'm talking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember it happened. I remember we played.
Yep.
What? It was good. It was one of the probably earliest things of those kind of things we ever did. You're always happy to just be on it and see what happens. And
yeah.
There was some irony. I ended up doing 4 solo shows in France for INXS in Switzerland many, many years later, which was pretty funny. I used to hang out in Set in southern France, and I was producing a couple of bands, made some friends there, and there was this really small bar, and I thought, let's do a solo show. I had nothing to do, never done one, so we did this little gig. We'd had a couple of French mates play with me on some songs, but here I was playing a solo gig, the first one ever, to like 30 friends in a little bar in France. And the guy who booked the Rifles for years, Mark Rodet, he was in Lausanne in Switzerland. And, I was schlepping around a couple of weeks. I'll go up and see Mark. And I rang up Mark and he said, "Hey, Mark, I've now got the confidence. I've just done my first ever solo gig. Do you reckon you could, book me a one-off solo show somewhere in Switzerland so I can earn my train fare and come and say good day?" He goes, "Yeah, all right, come on up." And I showed up in his office. We were talking for a while. He goes, "Oh, I got your gig." I said, "Oh, cool." He goes, "You're opening for INXS tomorrow in Geneva." I just cracked up and said, "You kidding?" He goes, "No." I went, "Oh, fuck, all right." So I went and did it, and then sort of met him, and they said, "Oh, fuck, come and do some more." So I did 3 more.
Wow, that's a great story.
And then they wanted me to go to Madrid and Portugal and a few places with them, but their management didn't want to pay me more than $200, which I didn't care, but I said, give me another $100 for the train ticket and I'll come. But they didn't.
Wow.
They didn't have the budget.
Great stories.
It was pretty funny. Yeah. Oh, look. To this day, one of the, I don't know if this will translate to radio, podcast, or whatever. One of the funniest things I've ever heard from a stage was the first time I walked out to play in front of INXS's crowd, and I think I don't know, I can't remember if I might have walked out, and I came through the curtains, and there was this scream because they thought I was them, and it just went, "Ah!" An instantaneous stop from everyone in the room as soon as they realised I wasn't INXS. And it's very hard to translate that, but it really, to this moment, is one of the funniest things I've ever heard, because this cacophonous, really, really loud scream that in unison stopped dead. Didn't have a delay, didn't have a decay or reverb, nothing. It was like, "Ah!"
Wow.
I will never forget that sound.
Hopefully that could be be put in the book one day. But, mate, another gig I've highlighted in Rifles history, and I really do hope that one day these are written about in more detail in book form. 1988, Roskilde Festival in Denmark, headlined by Sting, Bryan Adams and Leonard Cohen.
Yep. Yeah, that was Roskilde was fun. That was a good one.
It's a big one.
Yeah, I think we played after. Yeah, the band. What was Bjork's band?
Sugar Cubes?
Yeah, sure. The Sugar Cubes were on before us. I remember them. They were cool. There was a couple of other things, and there was. Yeah, INXS were on that gig too. Actually, the night before. Soul Asylum were on it. INXS and Bryan Adams. Yeah, me and Jim stumbled. I know we were having a drink with INXS, and we were like, I watched Bryan Adams, and we stumbled up side stage and ended up almost on stage, and we thought, fuck, we better get out of here. But yeah, Roskilde was a particularly good gig. We did play a really good gig then. That was one of the ones. It was nice to do. You know, a lot of the big festival gigs, you know, you're sort of doing them. I don't necessarily enjoy them as much, but you do them to do them. If you can pull it off, it's great. I think Roskilde was good enough. It also, the other memory of Roskilde is how much I disliked Jesus and Mary Chain. Not even so much musically. It was one of those art things where, you know, we wanted to have, Dave and I wanted to have a quad box each because it was a, you know, big stage, big tent. And basically, Jesus and Mary Chain were on just after us on a different stage, and they commandeered all the 12 quad boxes from the whole festival, only plugged 2 of them in, but wouldn't let us use them. So it's like, you know, it's lucky they didn't come anywhere near us. Wouldn't have been a nice thing. But I remember because there was one of the Danish crew guys knew someone who had a couple of quad boxes, so he might have borrowed our van and driven off and found these boxes from a mate's place, you know, half an hour away, and brought them back so we could have a good gig. So that was also a really nice moment. But yeah, we definitely nailed that gig. That was a beauty. Thought of something because it came up. I'll just say it. So as I'm not sounding too grumpy, I reckon if Heaven on a Stick and Blind Ear had reversed, it would have made more sense. Sound of Heaven on a Stick probably would have been even more popular than Blind Ear at the time, and vice versa.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I never thought of that.
Yep. The irony of things, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that I hate Heaven on a Stick. I just, as I said, I think it was the wrong sounding record at the absolutely wrong time for someone like us to do. Not that it was a bad record at all.
Kent, let's shine the light over another important part of your world, which is production. You've produced a lot of great bands over the years, including so much of the Rifles material. Many fans may not be aware of the stuff you've produced: Kryptonics, Mushroom Planet, Proton Energy Pills, Wet Taxis, Bored, Mudhoney, Seaweed Gorillas, Hydromatics, and Asteroid B612, to name but a few. What do you like most about producing other bands? And I guess further to that, has there ever been a band you've wanted to work with but it didn't come to fruition?
Yeah, there was a couple. Now that I think who it was.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a couple I'd have liked to have worked with, but it never happened. I did something with the Powder Monkeys. I think I mixed a live record of theirs that never came out.
Okay.
Wouldn't have minded doing them. But to answer the first bit, yeah, it was one of those things that just sort of started happening, and as I started mixing some bands live, because I'd hear mates playing and think, fuck, stand up the front, it sounds good, stand back here. And so I tried to learn how to do some of that, just to sort of help them. Studio stuff, I was interested in it when the Rifles started recording, and the nature of how it was, it's not something I necessarily sat down and thought about. It was just, you know, the first couple of times you record, you go, oh, fuck, this is weird. But how does this work? And then, you know, Dave Connor, who did the first couple of Rifles engineering records, on the second record, he showed me a few things, and it's like, okay, this looks feasible. You look at a mixing desk, you think, how does anyone run that? Then when you realise, you know, each channel has exactly the same stuff on it, you go, oh, okay. Makes more sense if you can sort of master a couple of bits of it. And, you know, I can listen to my productions in hindsight and it's like, should have done a better job there or this. But it's the nature of how you hear things and of their time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing you could say in the favour of the Rifles records, that in most cases they stand the test of time, even if it's not musically or whatever. it's because we didn't fit in. We didn't follow any of the current trends in production, so we weren't dated. There's a lot of records you can listen to and go, oh, that's that big drum sound, that's that guitar effect sound, that's that vocal, those kind of things. And they date them to a particular time, and sometimes it's okay, but other times it's like, man, I can't listen to that anymore. And it was just to help and just see how it goes, and it was also, you know, part of it was probably if you can earn a bit of money here and there, doing something you like and helping your friends sound better, or helping anything, you know. There's a couple of French bands I produced that I really liked as well. And La Secta from Bilbao, or the Basque country. They were good. That's a good record. I was pretty happy with that. I'll try and remember what it's called before the end of it. There was a record, La Secta. Gorka runs Bang Records, Munster and Bang, out of Spain. I liked the stuff. I like, if I really think about it, now that you're making me, as it was how I sort of understood meditation before I started meditating, perhaps, because there was always a level of transcendence playing music and listening to it. And I find when mixing a song, if you're prepared to listen, there's a point where the song tells you where to go and the song becomes ready. You just have to be open to follow. You do the bits and manipulate it to a certain point, and then the song starts telling you. It works with you for a while, and then if you overthink it, you can fuck it up again. But there's a point where it becomes a feeling rather than a sound, and that's what I think I liked, and that's what happens to me at gigs. And, you know, even, you know, I think Dave was the one who first said, you know, the Rifles, any band probably, but, you know, there's a point where the sixth member takes over, where we play as one, in a sense.
Yeah.
And you're witnessing, you sort of basically, a really great gig is it's completely physically demanding, but you're almost standing there watching yourself do it. And that, every good Rifles gig was that. You know, you're having a laugh, there's all this kind of stuff, but it's also like this level of transcendence. And I think working with other bands, it's momentary, but when you find those moments where you go, yep, any good producer or engineer probably know, yeah, they've nailed that version, or this bit of that, they're getting close, the feels there, this is the sound, the feelings coming through the speakers as well as the sound. And yeah, just trying to help capture that within a limited timing and budget, because I never worked on any big budget productions.
Yeah, that's an interesting, very interesting insight, which a lot of fans, you know, wouldn't even consider. Yeah,
everything's to me mystical. You know, if being a human being and the physical is all there is, then we're fucked.
Mate, I do want to talk about...
It's to enjoy this. It's to enjoy that aspect of life, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah, the beauty, you know, on a personal level, I was very grateful. I grew up an atheist, so the first 20-something years of my life I was an atheist. So it led to the possibilities of all things. I wasn't stuck in a box of a religion. I didn't have to follow anything. So when certain things came to me in certain ways, and I could relate to that as sound, and, you know, vibration, sound is meditation, is mantra, is any of those things, then, you know, and those moments of transcendence from being in the Celibate Rifles, there was nothing like it until, you know, then it was like, okay, now I understand why this happened, why that happened, and it all corresponds, you know. Some people say, hey, can you meditate and play that kind of noisy fucking racket? You know, because to me it's exactly the same thing. When you find that place of silence, the place between the breath, in anything, then you're in it.
A couple of things I missed early on I just want to touch on. Of particular note to Rifles collectors will be the Pam and the Passion 7-inch by Pam Burridge from 84. I owned that record at one stage, penned by Damo from memory. Did you guest on that record as well, and was there an aim for commercial success with that, or just a bit of fun?
No, that was all Damo's thing.
Yep.
I played on it. Pam was a good friend, but I liked her, and Damien wanted to do it, but he wanted to do it without the rifle. So at first it was a little, you bloody fucking bastard, why can't we do it? We're mates with Pam. But that was Damien took from the surfing culture that aspect of merch and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, he when he took over raising his son and stuff, he would do whatever it took. You know, it's like, yeah, I don't even know if the sunglasses company's in business, but, you know, Damien's idea, get sponsored, you know, do this, and so he learned that from the surfers. They get sponsored and get all that kind of stuff. So he'd go and bet a dozen pairs of sunglasses or shoes or whatever he could. He'd give us a pair each and sell the rest. You know, but that was the nature of his needing his way to survive and bring up his sons, you know. But that's what he was trying to put another aspect to Pam, because she was early in being a pro-woman surfer. And, you know, had she been a few years later, would probably have tapped into the marketing that they all had subsequent. So it was, you know, another one, an aspect of Damien seeing things for as they were and trying to make it work, and taking something from surfing and making it go another way. So, yeah, it was absolutely, you're right, it was for commercial success if he could make it happen. But I don't think the circumstances created the opportunity.
And I just watched the video clip a couple of weeks back, and I think it was filmed in a surf club somewhere, by the way. Looks like a lot of fun, so listeners should check that out online.
Yep. I didn't even know they did a film.
Ken, I'd like to talk a little bit about your recent solo album, Set Yourself Easy. 13 tracks, and
yep.
I think one of the liner notes says it best, which states, muse along and ponder life's ironies with these droll yet uplifting sounds, because overall I think it's uplifting and a diverse gathering of material, which I found really appealing.
Cool.
The opener called Syntax Breath is great. It's an acoustic shuffle which grabbed my attention quickly, and if fans, I guess, you know, they're looking for something with a rifle-esque feel to it, then Lockdown Shuffle has elements in there. What can you tell me about those two tracks?
I like playing with words. Lockdown Shuffle is obviously just an obvious reference to the bullshit of COVID and locking people up and taking away our rights and people not standing up to say anything about it. For something that, you know, I won't go into the rest of it, but it's been the taking away of privacy, freedom and all those kind of things I found has been appalling, and the lack of resistance in this country to it was also sort of appalling, because you'd probably remember when they tried to bring in the Australia card, it got howled down in almost minutes.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks.
It did.
Now with the infusion of the digital technology on everyone and the manipulations of that, people are happy to hand over their rights and their privacy for a bit of convenience. And, you know, I found that fairly appalling. You know, whatever you think about COVID is anyone's business, but it's, you know, it's pretty rare that you're going to get super sick. But as it is, you know, I won't go down that track. Set Yourself Easy. I mean, Syntax Breath, syntax is language. I like studying language and seeing what can be done with it and having fun. You know, word plays that don't make any sense but sort of can create a picture. And as I said, it was one of those things. I was making music just for the hell of it. I think I bought, when we did Beyond Respect, Rick O'Neill, who's a mastering guy, but he produced the record, he had that computer, and it was, I think, state of the art at the time, and a couple of years later it wasn't. So I just got it off him pretty cheap and thought I'd start learning to do it, and I was just making music for a laugh, never thinking there were a bunch of ideas that were unfinished. And then the Laneway guys, who I've been working with for a few years, putting the rifles out and stuff, said, come on, we need some new stuff. And I said, I got some songs lying around, but I haven't done anything with them. So I started finishing them and then enjoying them. And, you know, one of the few good things about the lockdowns and stuff was like, all right, well, I better do some of this. I've learned the quality of digital has improved immeasurably in the last 5 years. It was pretty bad in the early days and cumbersome, but it's improved a lot. And, you know, the DAW I like to use, which is Mixbus, is very analog. A lot of people are on Pro Tools or, you know, Reaper, Ableton, and all that, but I really like the Mixbus because it's set up analog. It sounds more analog, and my brain can function on it. So, you know, I can personally hear the difference between recording in a studio, recording to tape, but it's pretty bloody close. A couple of the songs I did some bits down at Jim's studio at Oceanic Studios in Brookie, but a lot of it have just been done here. And, you know, I've never been adverse to technology. It's just if it doesn't function, if it's not fit for purpose, then I stop using it. But everything's improved digitally and I can find ways to do it. And, you know, even using modelling amps and stuff like that, if I have to, from knowing how to make a couple of amps live work, because I think one of the skills the Rifles had was the ability to play loud. Some of the old Aussie bands had that. A lot of bands don't have that skill. You have to learn it. It is a thing. I remember reading an article from Lobby Lloyd where he talked about volume, and volume can be hurtful, but if you get it to a certain level, it takes it beyond pain to a whole other thing. And, you know, that can be pretty stupid if it chases its tail, but if you get that right place, the art of playing loud is something else. And, you know, trying to capture that in a digital situation, it's been challenging but sort of fun. So, you know, I slave all these things together and do all these things with these digital modelling things that you're not supposed to do technically, but it sort of creates a much better outcome than if you just do them as suggested.
I have had it, I've just got some speakers set up. I've got a 70s stereo in my garage here and was cranking it this afternoon, and it just sounds fantastic.
Not good. I got a big old Leonard Audio valve amp, Australian made, which I listened on.
I also really like, there's a song titled Minatween. It has a laid-back, floating kind of feel with some nice acoustic, finger-picking fretwork as well. But my favourite song could, in fact, be the title track, Set Yourself Easy. Again, another catchy strip-bare tune with appealing lyrics, which I feel have a really positive vibe running through it. Look at now to access the how, take a piece of space, time to undo the downline, set yourself easy and make a new rhythm. Lovely lyrics, I think. Kent, can you give me some background info, please, to Set Yourself Easy? And you know what, then we're going to cut to that song. Why not?
Yeah, cool. It's just, it's that whole thing of, if I could have, I'd have made an album of instrumentals. Because, you know, I don't necessarily like singing. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to write something, what'll I do? And a lot of it's trainer consciousness stuff, but, you know, I'll just say, what's a good line? And, you know, something will come up, Set Yourself Easy will come up, and like, how do I frame things around that? You know, I like to keep things lighthearted and humorous, but make a point. You know, it's good to create people's thought. You know, the Rifles were always political, not necessarily straight up, like maybe Lockdown was direct. At times it was, but, you know, that was part of Damien's thing as well, you know. Observe the challenges of life, the humour of life, and, you know, the finding a balance between, you know, we used to discuss it a lot. You want to take care of the environment, you want to do this, you want to live in as much integrity as possibly can, but you still got to pay your rent, and we didn't set up the system of all this capitalist bullshit where it's doing its thing. And the observations of that and just trying to keep it funny. And, you know, there are words, you know, English is it's a good language for swearing, and it's a language for dummies and manipulation mostly. But there's some good words in it, so I like to have fun with it. And then, you know, there's one song on the album, For the One, which is in a passe syntax grammar, which is a mathematical formula for language developed by this American guy. So I studied that for a while and like it. And it's a way to create legal documents where the sentence means the same thing frontwards and backwards, and putting, you know, assignment of authority to the nouns and the verbs, and rather than leaving them out. So everything absolutely means something. And then within the playfulness of lyrics, that's what I sort of like to do. If I'm not writing about something absolutely specific, then it's like, okay, how can I have some fun? A little bit of mysticism and humour, but make it work. And like a lot of things, you don't necessarily think about it. I sit down to do it, then it comes and it starts, and that's when I know it's usually going the right way.
So lyrics come easy for you, or not always?
Not always, but it's a skill, and it's one of those things. I've got to the point where, okay, I have to sing songs, and I'm doing all these solo songs, so I'll have some music to a point, and it's like, all right, better write something. what's happening, what do I feel like, and the most recent one, which isn't on Set Yourself Easy, but Angel Wag, the recent song I put out, that was, what would an angel think if he came and had a look at Earth? You still have that thought, and it's like, you run through that. Would they be happy? Would you be happy with your life if, someone from the other side came over and said, what are you doing? And that's sort of what I like to think of that perspective. If our higher self or our other side were watching us, what would we be doing that we'd be happy with? What would we be doing that we know is a compromise? What would we be doing that, we'd like to change? And how can we?
Angel Wag, I really like, reminded me a lot of Steve Lucas, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a compliment. I like Steve.
And there was one called Now You're Here, a song you released about a year back. It's quite a evocative tune with your acoustic guitar and vocal right up front. What was the story behind that one?
I've never liked love songs.
Okay.
So I thought I'll try and write one. It's that simple.
That's simple.
I've never really liked love songs, and I thought, all right, I don't know how you can put words to something that is a feeling like that. So I thought, what the hell? Try not to be narrow-minded. I'll have a go. It's a song like that, and I just thought, all right, let's tune into some feelings. What comes up, and then a bit of a story with it, and off it goes.
And I invite anyone who is, obviously, people who listen to our podcast are music fans, but a decent set of headphones and listen to some of your recent stuff. I just find it's the best way to get involved with the music which you've come up with, particularly this new album. It's fantastic.
No, thank you. It is. In the old days, I remember as a kid, because you grow up and a lot of the time you had to listen to music under headphones.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily great, but I used to love it when I'd hear little bits and pieces. So I've always tried to remember that, to just have little panning things or little sounds that you might not. A lot of the Rifles records, if you listen deeply, there'll be guitar things in the background. If you're listening on speakers, you might not hear them, but if you can hear them in the back corner of a headphone, a little thing that we might have put on. I just like chucking all that stuff in, and it does add to the texture of a song.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll play a guitar part, and it's not even there to be heard, but when I pull it out, the song doesn't sound as good.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There's a lot of acoustic guitar in the background on a lot of Rolling Stones records that you don't necessarily hear, but if it wasn't there, they wouldn't be those songs.
I do have to ask you about Yage, the Italian punk band whom you worked with from 89 onwards. My gosh, it's the Pasquini brothers, isn't it? And Gabrielle's vocals. What a powerhouse on vocals. There was an album called Mutant Date. That's a monster of an album.
Oh, cool.
Hold Me, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. I'm just going off my memory. Entire album is killer, and I think well worth people searching that one out.
Yeah, it's up digitally on Laneway. I don't know if you could find a CD.
Okay.
I think there's an Italian label, Area Parata. I think they're putting out the first two Yage albums on CD sometime this year, next year, whenever they get around to it. It's not a high priority, but I believe they're doing it. I just remastered one of them.
Okay. Is there a chance of Damo the Musical being released on CD as well, or is it just vinyl at this stage?
It's only going to be vinyl.
Okay.
I mean, it could be, but it's that challenge of everyone says, oh yeah, put it out on that, I'll buy it, and then you get stuck with 200 copies.
Sure.
If someone out there wants to put it out on CD, we'd be happy for them too. I just couldn't be bothered because I know that it'll be me doing it all.
Yeah.
And I've had enough of it. The LP's out. I've done that. I've honoured that part of the agreement I made to myself, the band, and others. And the video and DVD, not DVD, sorry, the video of the show documentary will be out pretty soon.
Okay.
And if people want CDs, I can burn one, mate.
Look, just a couple more and then I'll let you get out of here. Amongst a slew of covers the Rifles used to include in their sets, I always loved the cover of Identity by X-Ray Specs, with Damo's vocals always spot on. Off the top of your head, what were some of your favourite covers to do live?
That was a beauty.
Yeah.
A couple of Devo ones were fun. I think we used to like doing Peace Rob. Sadly, I found some tapes of it. I'm actually seeing if I can salvage a version of Identity now that you mention it, funnily enough. We did a specific, around the Heaven on a Stick time, we went into a studio and recorded a complete covers album of about 15 songs. But we got the rhythm tracks down, but never got any vocals done on it because of other political and other financial things between companies and studios and that kind of stuff. So it never got finished, and the tapes got lost, I think.
Okay.
But there was a cassette, there's a rough of the cassette, and I'm seeing if I can scrape Damien's vocals off a couple, because they were guide vocals buried in the mix. But that were some great songs. There's a really cool version, unfortunately, he didn't sing it, of I Want You, Need You, Love You, that old 60s punk Australian song. It's like, it's almost worth,
Wow. I hope
someone else to sing it. We'll see what happens.
Hope that can come to fruition.
I used to like all the dumb covers we did because, it was lighthearted and fun. It's always good to play Akadaka. But, I liked them all. Some of them didn't last very long, and it was always funny getting Damien to sing songs that chicks did.
Yeah. Mate, so much of your story we haven't got to today, including talking about the Krent EP from 1990 on Waterfront that I was a big fan of. I owned that. Or indeed the Tubular Greens and the stupendous Live at Gruta 77 album from 2006 with its tributes to many Oz rock greats, including great takes of the Atlantics, the Tats, Astra Wally, Asteroids, straight back to you to name but a couple. But we will have to get you back on the show sometime in the future to really delve into more of your history. But mate, let's finish up. It's been a great honour and wonderful to chat with you today, and of course to talk more about the recent releases. If fans wish to purchase the vinyl copy of Damo the Musical or Chasing Chocomel, and also your solo album, Set Yourself Easy, I will give these details at the end of the show. But I guess what's the best way? Is it
at the moment you can send me an email, or there's a page off my website, a Rifles page, where you can put in an order. Then I'll send you the details because I didn't get around to doing other stuff. Okay. Fairly soon I'll probably hand it over to a distributor. Worst comes to worst, just email Stuart and he can pass it on. But sallysdtm@protonmail.com is the email address, and I'll be reading that. So if you send an email to that, I can recontact you back. And the website was also, I won't try and pronounce that. I'll let you do that. Rifles page, Tian Her Healing Arts. But yeah, that'll get you to it. That's the Rifles page. Cool. We'll put a link to that. There's a bit of video, and that'd be great. Happy for people to purchase. What future plans? What's in the works for the remainder of 2022? I don't know. I'm just living. I do my thing. I'll drink a lot of tea, obviously. Yep. Help a few people here and there. Radio KSG is a project I'm doing with Russ from Board and Ben from the Hellmen. Their historical stuff. That's got some things out. I think Bang's putting an LP out sometime this year. There's some good tunes on that. Maybe a trip down to Melbourne to do that. The singer on Mutant Date, Yage, that you mentioned, I've been doing a remote across the world, but like a thing called Deep South, where she's singing a couple of songs in Spanish and English, which is cool. And that I don't think the Family Dog's going to do much because Midnight Oil are doing their thing. Okay. We might be able to sneak something in, but other than that, just living. I'll keep doing solo music. If anyone wants to have a play and a jam, if there's a project to do, I'm open to it. Mate, is it conceivable that we may hear some of the great Rifles songs aired live again? Obviously, it can never be the Rifles without Damo, but somehow, maybe under a different name, for example, the Steedman Morris Band, you could go out and play these iconic songs. I guess fans would really appreciate something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not close to it, but I'm only one of the band, and it's a band decision, that stuff. Funny, I think Ren and Mick, the two guys who used to stage and sound for us, they suggested we just go and play a gig without a singer because everyone knows the words. I laughed at it. It's not a bad idea. But we'll just have to see. Time will tell. Yeah. It's impossible to know. There was once an offer to go and play a festival in Spain with Jello singing. We don't know. It's not anything I can say. I hope so, but I also don't mind if we don't. It's not.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's not something I want to pressure the other guys to, and it's entirely up to them.
Fair enough. Ken, I know that you've been involved, as you mentioned, in tea and energy healing for many years. It sounds like a very positive world for any person to immerse themselves in.
Yeah. I mean, tea is transcendence. How it came to me and the level of ancient spirit in these things. It's tradition. There's some great music. Tea is sound. But, drinking a tea bag is something, but drinking tea that's been harvested by people for hundreds or thousands of years. I have some teas from, 300, 500,000-year-old trees, and it's a whole other world of tapping into nature spirit.
Mm.
It's one way I've found. I love tea. I try not to push anything on anyone, but if you've got enough energy, think of the Energizer Bunny, it runs out when it doesn't have any. The body's the same. If you get enough energy of a good nature, then if you're playing other things to it, it can cope with it. But if you let yourself run down and you don't have enough energy, then you forget what it's like to feel good, so you accept feeling bad as a way of life, and that isn't what we were designed to do. Music's a great way to feel good, but so is drinking great tea. And any natural substance is more beneficial, I understand the other stuff. I had my time with it, and it's useful, and I don't regret anything, but it's much more fun to feel clear and energized than not.
Wonderfully put.
Everything leads to something else.
Wonderfully put. Mate, before you go, every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band, something which is significant to them. What would you like to choose and why?
Oh, fuck, I don't know. I'll tell you what, because I didn't know, but I just got told Chris Bailey passed away.
Mm.
Play Know Your Product by the Saints. The first time I heard that just floored me. I mean, there's probably hundreds of, dozens at least of other songs I could pick, but I remember the first time I heard that song. I think it was Tony Barrell on 2JJ, and I got home from school, and I used to get home and turn on 2JJ to go, what great song can I hear? Because especially between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, I used to get home and he used to play some good songs from all over the world. But I walked in and I turned the radio and I heard that song, da 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 da, and I thought, what is that? That's just combined everything. That'll do. That was a great album. I loved the Saints,
Yeah.
I know the Rifles probably sounded more like Birdman, but I liked the Saints better than Birdman if I had to have a preference. Loved and respected both, but just the Saints just had something that I thought was great, especially the second and third album.